Welcome to Mentoring Moments. Mentoring Moments is a sub-series of the E-Commerce Edge podcast. It is composed of clips taken from Jason's one-to-one and group mentorship sessions. Hey everybody, welcome to another episode of the podcast. It is my absolute pleasure to welcome Patrick Meegan to the pod. Welcome, Patrick.
Yeah, great to be here. Thank you.
Awesome to have you along for the ride today. You are the Managing Director of Investor Group Services, and I'm sure you are going to tell me what that is all about. But how did you get into this whole game of insights, analytics, big data, e-commerce, digital? Like, what sucked you into this incredible industry that we're proud, all of us, to work within?
Yeah, I think it ultimately comes from a fascination with consumer insight and how people make decisions. And I spent a lot of years early in my career working in consumer products and touching on various aspects, e-commerce, physical, in-person sales, and just like it's endlessly fascinating to me. And pricing is one aspect of that.
No question about that. And you do seem to be really now specialized, and you've niched down really heavily into that pricing consultation game, right? The reality is that we have a world in which price drives so many purchasing decisions, not just on the low side, meaning that a product has to be cheap enough for someone to be able to afford, but also it has to be expensive enough to communicate value. And obviously you want to be able to maximize your profit potential when you're selling something, whether that be a physical good or a digital service or software. And so there really is, I think of science, because I've read quite a few books on pricing models and entrepreneurship books on pricing, and it seems to me that if I was to boil all of it down, it's part art, part science.
That's fair. Yep. If you think about it, it's what you said about value in relation to prices is fundamentally what you're trying to get out is when you're setting a pricing strategy, making changes to a pricing strategy. And there are parts of it that are psychological. They're part of those that's quantitative. And so when you talk about art and science, there's a toolkit to measure and gain insight into each, and a balance, and then being able to use those tools together is fundamental to getting to good strategy and tactical execution.
And I've found that in my consultation to e-commerce brands over the years and then working inside of brands, pricing at scale, particularly across very large categories of products with varying levels of competition, replacement options, alternative options, upsells, cross-sells, brands really struggle with this idea of pricing. They really struggle with it. And they, in addition to the regular challenges of market pressures, whether they're overstocked, whether they're understocked, et cetera, we also have this situation where I think many brands don't even necessarily realize what sort of margins they should be aiming for to start with from a gross margin perspective, so that when they take into account COGS and operating overheads, that they even end up with a profitable, sustainable business to begin with. They don't even understand the most basic fundamentals of running and creating a sustainable business to start off with. Do you run into that too? That I'm assuming that most of the brands you work with are a little bit more advanced than that, and they're having some complex pricing issues. Maybe it's down to a specific market or vertical or a category, and maybe it's down to a specific competitor set that they're trying to win against, and whether they've got pricing power or not, whether they're selling other people's goods or whether they're selling their own stuff as a D2C brand. There's lots of things that come into play here, but how often is it that you run into businesses where you have to start with pricing 101 before you can even get into the more complex aspects of pricing?
Yeah, here everything you said there is consistent with the experience I've had. So I think one of the fundamental flaws that in the approach that e-commerce brands and a lot of other types of companies make is they start from that basis of cost, and they're thinking about how can I charge a margin on this? And what ends up happening is, to your point about a sustainable business, is actually at the end of the day, the question comes down to where is their value? And then can I create a sustainable business off of these points of value? And so what that then ends up doing when you look at a business, let's say there's an existing business that's been going for a while and they're starting to have margin problems. You can go in and look at it and say, okay, there's sections of this business where you could actually charge more. There's other parts of your business where you potentially are overpriced, but because you're beholden to this cost plus approach, you're basically pinned into overpricing because you just got to make this certain margin. The question then becomes at some point is, which of these business segments do I want to be playing in? Should I be playing in? Should I change something on the back end? but I can't let my costs necessarily wag my pricing, because what ends up happening is consumers aren't making the decision based on where your costs are. And if you're looking at where the value is to a consumer or to a B2B buyer, whatever the situation may be, you're going to allow yourself to stay aligned to where the value is. And then you're making different decisions. It's okay, if I can only price at this level, but my cost is this high and that's a bad margin, that shouldn't be a question of I should just be able to push my price up. It's, should I be in this game? Should I be playing a different game? Should I be looking at different channels? Another approach.
Or I guess in addition to that, your advice might be, hey, we actually need to try to find maybe an alternate supplier that has better leverage and scale.
Stuff, certainly right.
And also all of our ops costs, we need to be looking at that, seeing if we're efficient enough, looking at SG&A, making sure you have to look at the business quite holistically, as opposed to just how much can we buy it for and how much can we sell it for. What can we do operationally to minimize our cost structures and to create a more sustainable business? Because as you say, if you just purely focus on this is what I'm buying it for and this is what I think the market can bear in terms of selling it, then that isn't necessarily opening the aperture wide enough to look at all the inputs that go into a pricing model.
Yeah, that's right. And certainly all of that back-end efficiency is something that should always be looked at and be part of it. It's when you look at where are the opportunities and how should I think about my pricing differently than today, the question is always going to be market facing and value focused. And that's where people don't spend enough time. So if you think about it, there's a lot of time spent on sales volume focus, on funnels and all of these things. But at the end of the day, your revenue is basically your volume times whatever mix of products you sold. But people tend to spend much more time on the volume than the price. And so if you even just allocated more of your time and attention and strategic focus to pricing, you're going to find a lot of different opportunities. And it's pretty epidemic, the under focus on pricing. And even if just people start to give it more time, even if they're not experts in it, that's going to pay off. And I've consistently seen that, where people companies that I see perform well on revenue and sustainably tend to be the ones who are thinking about value and thinking about how can they manage their pricing better, not just the back end side or the volume side.
And apart from hiring someone like you to come in and do a more holistic strategic review of pricing models, how do you find that the businesses that do this well, how are they operationalizing the aspect of pricing management? Like, how are they doing that at scale, particularly if they're an e-commerce brand and they've got thousands of SKUs, potentially tens or hundreds of thousands, or in the B2B world where I work, it can be literally millions of SKUs. How are they systematizing and operationalizing this concept of price management in the context of market, cost structures, sourcing, etc.? How are they operationalizing that in such a way that it's actually scalable with the business? Because that feels almost like an impossible task in a way.
Yeah. And I'll say, first off, there are tools out there and AI generated tools and machine learning tools that are out there that can help. But I'd say setting tools aside and just the approach, which any tool is going to be serving the approach, one of the first things to think about is to start to think about your portfolio of products in a 2x2 matrix. And if you think about, on one side you have perceived value, and on the other side you have perceived benefits. And if you think about that, those things that have really high perceived benefits and that you're really unique at, those are the ones where you want to be able to look at those and identify where you could sell more price, or you could sell them at higher prices. Oftentimes what we see is broad brush rules of thumb that are used across a portfolio. We're going to take costs and double it, or we're going to have a 30% margin across everything. So these kind of rules are overly simplistic because typically you're undervaluing. This is one of the flaws of cost plus pricing or markup pricing, is that you're not considering that value. If you start to bucket them even in just a few quadrants of what are those kind of flagship products that have the most value I could charge more for, and my company's a destination for, say it's your brand is known for X, Y, and Z, those have some more cachet you can charge on that. And then all the way down on the spectrum too, what are those things that everybody can get somewhere else? I can't charge as much margin on that. Just starting to segment out and go through that process, you're going to identify, if you are taking more of a broad brush approach, you're going to start to identify some pockets of margin you can develop and probably not see any impact on demand drop-offs as you make some of those adjustments on price.
And what is your general sense about dynamic pricing engines, dynamic repricing engines? Because there's a lot of technology out there that can facilitate this at scale. It can be rules-based. There's a whole lot of ways that some of it's AI-driven nowadays. It's taking inputs in that you can't even necessarily, you wouldn't be able to do as a human at scale. It can take into account momentum of sales of products, supplier performance, and replacing inventory and how long that typically takes. It takes into account a whole bunch of facets into that dynamic pricing model. It usually has some margin boundaries built into that to say, look, we're not going to sell something at a loss, so therefore here's the rule around this, here's our cost of goods sold, so therefore this is the rule, this is the boundary, this is how we're going to ring fence this. But it feels like a lot of brands are starting to think very seriously, if they haven't already, implementing some kind of dynamic repricing engine. But even if they do that, is this a scenario where somebody like you would typically come in and help them configure rules that make sense for their business and their market, so that they're making realistic ring fencing around the dynamic repricing?
Yes. Well, I'm not a tool vendor, not a programmer, but a lot of we often make recommendations about different systems that should be used. But fundamentally what it's getting at is if someone has a large number of SKUs that they have to manage, that they're finding that they're in a market where there is profit to be had in frequent revisiting of pricing, it makes sense to start looking at this, partly because your competition likely is as well. And it just makes sense. And it's not like the market's going against that. Like the technological progression is toward more and more of that capability. But what I also like about it is, like I said earlier, it's going to force you to start thinking about pricing more and start thinking about it strategically and operationally. So it creates those environments for you to have to make decisions and rules and set logic and test and review in a way that a more manual process makes you A, blind to, and B, not able to react to very well. So it drives a lot of virtuous behaviors within an organization. I think the other thing is you learn important things about your market by watching what the data is going to provide in those types of tools. And you become smarter at your business overall than you could have doing it manually or in Excel or anything else like that.
And I found, and I'd love your thoughts on this too, is that you oftentimes have greater pricing power the more frequently and reliably you have the greatest percentage of your catalog in stock, right? So in other words, you can oftentimes, if you are the only one that has it or one of a handful that actually has this good in stock to ship today, right now, I complete my order, it ships out. And the other thing I discovered as I was doing this research when I was working inside brands and I was still an employee inside brands, is that there was a direct correlation between average catalog availability as a percentage and conversion rate. Now, this makes sense, right? Like when you think about it logically, very rarely
you sell what's in stock.
You're going to sell. Yeah. You're going to sell what's in stock, but also for most brands that are selling non-high ticket items, very rarely is their average cart size 1 unit. 9 times out of 10, it's going to be 2 units, 3 units, 4 units of different items, different SKUs. And in order for customers to get the benefit of shopping in one place and getting things like loyalty points, getting cheaper free shipping, etc., they want to consolidate their order with one supplier if that one supplier can supply all their goods. And we've seen it even when I was working inside retailers. If one of our top products was out of stock, it would impact conversion across everything, because the reality is that more often than not, one of the items in the cart would be that item, and then they would add 3 or 4 other items at the same time. But if that one item's out of stock, they're going to go and find another place where they can get all 4 items and have it shipped to their door. And so it feels like that pricing leverage is intimately tied to inventory availability. You can't separate those two.
Yeah, especially on flagship products. So this is where you need to understand some of that, like you mentioned, trip driving or basket driving type behaviors, which are those core products that make the move. So for instance, I worked for Huggies diapers early in my career. And so when you're out of diapers, there's no choice but to go and get them. And often you can't wait. You have to go in person and get them, right? And your point about availability, you are the vendor that's got this product, and you know that is enormous for pricing power, partly because it actually protects the market against, it balances the supply and demand. If some people think it's unfair to take prices up when inventory is scarce, but actually that keeps the market from actually becoming gutted and having nothing to provide. In fact, I've seen that in a number of different avenues where companies didn't have some sort of Uber calls it surge pricing or some sort of dynamic pricing around inventory shortage. You even see like rental companies that'll rent you a generator or whatever. They'll do this because there's nothing more for the market if it all gets sucked up at the current price. And thinking about those things is super important. Building in some of that logic is really key, but also understanding which are your trip drivers or basket anchors, because then you can start to create promotions around it. You can market around that. You can retarget people based on their purchase patterns and look at some of those. There's all sophisticated tools that can do this as well. But if someone's tending to buy a certain type of product, what are those ancillary complements that could be part of the next purchase or the basket building? But everything you said, I completely agree with.
And when you go into work with some of these e-commerce or even SaaS brands for that matter and software brands, what are the typical things, like when you do your discovery, right? And when I go in and I'm starting to consult, we have a deep dive discovery, we've got a questionnaire, and then we go in and we do workshops and we uncover things about their business. Oftentimes when I go in and I'm asking them questions, they have to go away and find the answer because it's literally something they haven't looked at in perhaps forever. And so it's something about their business they don't even know themselves. And so they enjoy discovery oftentimes because we're asking questions that they've never thought to even ask. And so when you first go in and you're doing this discovery around pricing consultation, what are the first types of questions that you're asking these brands so that you get a handle on, because we got to meet them where they are, right? We can't, I always think this crawl, walk, run scenario. We have to meet brands where they are. If they've never really thought strategically about their pricing, I'm guessing you start at a very different point than if they've got someone in the financial team or something like that, that they're dedicated, that they spend 100% of their 40-hour week just looking at pricing. That's a very different place to start, isn't it?
Yeah. Absolutely. In fact, there was a book written a while ago called World Class Pricing. It showed the different stages that you grow into of pricing from first time you ever looked at it to extremely sophisticated. And that's absolutely true. Yeah, a lot of times when we're getting into the initial stages, and let's say it's an e-commerce company, a lot of what we're doing is starting from the data, because there's a calibration that happens between if I go in and ask a bunch of qualitative questions, but I don't tie it out to the data and say, here's what's actually happening versus what I think people are talking about happening. We're able to drill in, identify some things, start to look at how products within product categories and subcategories are behaving from a pricing and volume perspective, looking at some elasticity impacts, meaning when price goes up, how does the demand move? Does it go up or down? Those kind of things that start to allow us to have a fact base. And then we'll come into that conversation or workshop, and then we're asking some specific questions versus kind of some generals, and it gives us a really good base to work from. So looking at that data, studying that data brings us up to a level of understanding, and then we're talking shop at that point. It's like, hey, I'm seeing this in your data. Why is that happening? Oh, nuance there. Okay, but what about this? Oh, I don't know what that happened. And then we dive into some important areas that we're saying, hey, it looks like there's pockets of opportunity here and here. Which ones are real? Which ones do we need to understand more about? Your clearance thing that you ran that changed pricing massively in Q4, whatever that is, those nuances.
And do you find that these brands are, how receptive are they to the idea of running, for example, A/B tests across their pricing? Because I find that a lot of retail brands, they'll test everything but pricing. Like they'll test a widget, they'll test a button, they'll test a color, they'll test a million different...
And none of those, most of those have a very low ROI, even if you master them marginally versus where they are. But yeah, pricing would be a huge one. It's a great point. Now, there's pitfalls there with A/B testing too, right? So if you think about it, you're going back and forth to this website. I think it's the perception is changing somewhat though with Amazon and others who have obviously fluid pricing on a lot of products. You're expecting kind of it to be in a range and versus it being in one static price forever. So it's changing some of that perception from what I've seen. But at the same time, performed well. A lot of companies don't run into issues with this. I think there are times where if you're making large moves, it can be pretty disruptive, but there's ways to do that and the ways to segment. And often, I think, again, like I said earlier, if you're doing broad brushes and everybody gets treated the same, that's where you tend to run into issues. But if you're segmenting and saying, okay, for new customers, we're going to try this, or for first time, or we have repeats, we're going to test this differently. And you're laying out that logic. A lot of times you can decrease the sensitivity and not doing everything to everyone. It's one piece of the volume is going to see this experience versus the other one. I've seen that work really well, and we've designed a number of those types of experiments, and they can get a lot of really great insight. But it also comes back to, I wouldn't start with the tool. I'd start with the strategy and say, what is it we want to test, and why are those the right things to test rather than testing everything? And then again, if you have one of the advanced pricing tools across your portfolio, that's going to be a capability that is probably going to be something that you're building in as a core skill set over time, is something you get really good at.
And how are you finding that in this modern world where Amazon dominates in many markets and you can get things Product discovery is instantaneous. I can have 5 tabs open at one time. I can have 5 sites open at one time, multiple marketplaces, multiple D2C websites, multiple suppliers, whether it's B2C, B2B, D2C, it doesn't really matter. Price discovery is almost instantaneous. And then we have pricing comparison and price shopping websites that allow us to compare side by side for the same SKU.
You got tools that are looking for coupons like Honey and others.
It's unbelievable. But what I'm finding, and I'd love your thoughts on this, is that I'm seeing brands get smarter about, instead of providing products, providing solutions. And so they're now starting to say, instead of us selling an individual SKU at an individual price, we're putting together packages, bundles, kits, solutions that you can't directly compare. You can't say that one item inside this bundle of 5 SKUs is this price. You can just say this bundle is this price. And I found this one specific example I'll give you. I was consulting with a 4x4 parts retailer, and they could sell individual suspension components, a shock, a rim, a whatever it might be, a light bar, whatever it might be. But what they found is that they had a lot more pricing power, and they would actually sell more, and their customers would end up being happier, and they could actually sell at higher prices. If, for example, let's say I've got a Jeep Wrangler, and it's a 2010 Jeep Wrangler, and I come in and I go, look, I want a lift kit, I want a full suspension kit, right? I want the trailing arms, I want the shocks, I want the rim set, I want everything. I want the whole kit. And maybe I want the roof rack, I want the towing kit, whatever it might be. And what they found is that even if they added an attribute against individual products that said, yes, this item will fit your car, so that they could filter the products for their vehicle, they found that even that was not as successful as saying, turnkey suspension kit for 2010 Jeep Wrangler. That when they had like a turnkey solution that took all the thinking out of the purchase, that all of a sudden now they reclaimed some pricing power, and all of a sudden now they went from being compared on price to being compared on their knowledge and their capability and their ability to differentiate.
So what I would say is, if you're trying to play the game that the biggest players are playing, and you're not anywhere near their scale, it's going to be really hard to win that game. And people get frustrated by that. It's, look, that's how it works. These Amazons of the world have all the scale benefits and a lot of the technology benefits that can't even be touched in the short term by some of these players. They have whole development teams that are working on this versus buying off the shelf software and all those things. What's true about what you said, and this is a principle that's worked in many markets over a long time, right? So think about this, Tide detergent, right? You can buy Tide detergent anywhere. It's the same liquid in a bottle that looks orange with that little target looking thing on it. And it's the same stuff. Enter Costco. And Costco, I don't know if they carry Tide or not, but you can see the club bottle, it's Sam's Club or one of the two, but they carry a different bottle and they'll have a different product. So they'll have a slight formula difference. So your example from the power sports retailer is an expertise sale, okay? And what they're doing is they're saying, we know how to solve this problem. They can aggregate all these parts and create a kit. Yeah, you can go out on the market, find it in some vendor and pick each one. You can do all the work. But again, that's trying to find the most absolute price sensitive person is always going to find the best deal. But if you design your business to chase that person, you're in a race to the bottom that you're likely not going to win. So is it an expertise sale in your category? Is it a relationship sale? Is it an experience sale? What is that thing that isn't lowest price that you can compete on and you can become exceptional at? And then you have to then start to own some of that positioning. And that's the only way to do it. Like I was recently buying some parts. It was a fuel pump for a boat, and you had to buy it from a marine store. And it was actually helpful because I could go and ask questions that I could never ask on Amazon. It was like, it did cost a little bit more, but at the same time I was like, I know I've got exactly the right part, and it was really obscure. So it was like, I'm happy to pay a little bit more and make sure I've got the right part versus another major vendor that had something like it and I wasn't sure.
And then you've got the hassle of, okay, let's say I've got family visiting in a week's time or 2 weeks' time, and I'm meant to be taking this boat out. I just simply cannot take the risk that I'm going to buy the wrong part, have to return it, get a new part, and then all of a sudden I can't get my boat out on the water on the off chance that it doesn't work, and we've only got 2 weeks off a year, and we're going to Lake Havasu or something like that for our family, our annual family trip, and now we can't go because I decided to try to save 10% on a part that is irrelevant in the grand scheme of things to the quality of my life, right? And the quality of my family's life. And so I think you make a very good point there, which is like convenience in many instances trumps all, right? Convenience of not only speed of getting you something, but getting something that's accurate and applicable to you in your exact scenario. That's part of convenience. It's not just how fast it gets to you, but is it the actual right thing that's going to solve my problem?
Yeah, and something that continues to fascinate me as I've worked with a number of I've worked with some influencer brands, I've worked with other retailers, and the ability to position your retail environment differently can allow for a lot more willingness to pay and for your products to sell that are comparable to those you could find at Amazon, but at much higher prices. And even something as straightforward as a baby receiving blanket. I worked with a brand that was selling at 2-3x what you could find on Walmart.com or Amazon.com, whatever.com is your preference. And it was a similar product. Some you could argue there's some additional features, but it was a baby receiving blanket, and they could charge these prices that others couldn't touch. Again, because it wasn't about product and price. It was about experience. It was about trust. It was about value and quality and what the baby benefits from. Those kind of things where it had nothing to do with, I'm going to be your web scraping best comparison on price.
And I think that raises a very good question in my mind, which is, okay, we've now got the Temus and the Sheins of the world, and a lot of brands, they won't admit that it's having a massive impact on their business, but it is. And the reality is, like you said, if we try to compete with, we're going to be out of business very quickly because we don't have the cost base that they do, and we don't have the scale that they have. And so the reality is we're never going to compete on that level. So we have to find other ways to compete. We have to find other ways to bring value to the table that isn't just purely based on this price-driven shopper. And like you said, I think it's really important for a brand to realize where and when they can win the price war, and where they can't, I think they really need to be in a position to be able to walk away from a certain type of customer, to the point where I see a lot of brands now where when they do, for example, their Black Friday, Cyber Monday deals, they will create those customers that are acquired during that period. They will segment them out uniquely, and they will push them into a unique discount sensitive or high propensity to discount segment, because they know that customer over the long term, they're going to be hard to retain. They're going to be hard to reconvert. They're going to be hard to remarket to. And probably the only time you're going to be able to reconvert them is when you offer them a deal, when you offer them a sale. And so instead of having site-wide sales, now I think a lot more brands are being much more targeted, especially with the advent of CDPs, customer data platforms. I think they're being a lot more cautious about how they segment their customer base so that they only really market discounts to the high propensity to discount customers, and the customers that 95% of the time pay full price for products. Why would you market to them with a discount? Because that's not going to increase the conversion rate for those customers. And so I think brands are definitely getting smarter about this. But what this leads me to in terms of a question is, how do you, when you're starting to think about, okay, here's maybe your kind of default pricing model, but what does the discount pricing model do? How does that upset the apple cart, so to speak, when either we've got seasonal discounting, we've got event-based discounting, we've got wholesale across the board discounting, or B2B sales, wholesale discounting? This starts to bring all of a sudden some additional complexities into, for example, when you're doing your margin forecasts. And you're trying to work out your unit economics, ultimately, is what you're trying to do. Mm-hmm. And when you're starting to forecast, okay, we think during this period, we are likely to be discounting on average about 10% or 15% or whatever it might be. How do you start weaving that discussion around discount modeling with standard price modeling?
Yeah, super important, right? Because one of the fastest ways to erode your price integrity is through discounting programs. So one of the first places to start, again, go back to strategy. What is it you're trying to drive in terms of the ways you're trying to activate people to buy or trade up? Or what is it you're looking for them to do? And then how do your marketing tactics support that? So if you look at and I've worked with a number of brands recently where we got deep into this because there were promotions all over the place. In fact, if you looked at some of the overlaps, it was almost like there was hard to find days where there weren't promotions going on. But then if you look at the sales trends, some of these aren't driving spikes. So you're literally just subsidizing the base volume you probably would have gotten anyway, or most of it. And so when you take out that discount, you probably dropped your profit dollars during that week or time periods. Like you mentioned about segments, your example of Black Friday. We could use examples of people who buy on discount only or people who are new to the business. So there's differences in terms of activating people to actually buy your product. And then you want to figure out, just because they're new doesn't mean they're monolithic. So you want to think about, okay, is this through some of your marketing? You see those reactions of how people are responding to it, and you can adjust some of your programming. But is this an acquisition program? Is this a trade up program? Is this something to increase lifetime value? So are you trying to add on additional things to a complementary or like a core product? Thinking about the razor and cartridge models, like they bought the razor and some cartridges. So well, like, what else can we sell to them? It is one of the things I see over and over again in the promotional space is a lack of attention to say, what are we trying to do with these tactics? And then line out a plan to do that and be specific about it, and then go back and check and see how it's performing against that. Are we getting increased LTVs? Are we getting more conversion than we got before? Or are we literally just throwing profit away because we're trying to just juice volume all the time?
Hey team, I have a big favor to ask you. Please pause this episode and send the link of this episode to someone you know that you think would enjoy this content. Really appreciate you spreading the word. This is how we grow. We're not a Joe Rogan. We don't have big, massive advertising budgets, but we absolutely want to grow. We want to get the learnings from all of these episodes out to as wide of an audience as possible, and we need your help to do it. Thank you. And now back to your listening.
And let's talk B2B for a moment, because B2B pricing gets exponentially more complex than B2C, D2C, whereas in the B2C world, usually you got one SKU, one price. It's that simple. In the B2B world, because price is an attribute of the customer, not an attribute of the product, it gets exponentially more complex. And when I'm going and I'm consulting to some of these B2B retailers, one of the first things we look at is their pricing complexity, their pricing models. And oftentimes they say, oh, our pricing has grown organically. And what they mean by that is without a plan. And so oftentimes you'll find that literally they might have 2,000 B2B accounts, and every single one of those 2,000 accounts will have a unique price list with it's been negotiated literally for a certain subset of SKUs. Literally the price has been negotiated with their sales rep. And so that becomes, again, that from a forecasting and analytics perspective starts to become really messy when you're saying, okay, we want to change the base price of a product, but we don't know what ultimately that impact, how many of our customers is that even going to impact? And do we retain that existing custom negotiated price, or do we simply, the percentage that we raise the base price, do we add that to their negotiated price? And can we move to a standardized tiered price model with the odd exception here and there, as opposed to everything's an exception? And this is one of the big things that I spend a ton of time working with B2B brands on is, and what we'll usually do is we'll say, okay, let's look at the average price that is being sold across all these accounts for a given SKU. And what we usually find is that even for negotiated pricing on a per SKU, per customer level, if we could round up by less than 1 or 2% or round down by less than 1 or 2%, we could put almost all these customers in 4 bands worth of pricing. And that would make it super simple for us. It would make it super simple and transparent for them. They would realize, geez, okay, maybe it's a volume-based discount, or maybe it's an annual spend threshold that puts them into the next pricing tier. Whatever the rules are to put you into a different pricing tier, you can make that a heck of a lot more transparent and incentivize them to spend more with you by having more transparent pricing models, as opposed to saying, no, we negotiate every single SKU with you. And that sounds really good because it sounds like you're giving them a personalized service, but man, does that make your pricing model very opaque.
A lot of those things are ringing true from what I see very frequently in business-to-business environments. So a couple of points that I'd make there. One is that when you talk about custom negotiated pricing, what it often turns into is Wild West pricing. And so while everyone's trying to do the right thing for their account and reps are doing the best they can, what it lacks is a structure often. And for instance, what you'll see in those often, like I said before, when we grab a data set and we look at and trying to understand what's going on, one of the things you'll see right off is if I benchmark all the pricing for, say, one product or service that's similar, you're going to see some of the smallest customers getting as good a deal on a per unit basis as the biggest, most loyal, long-standing customers. And that's problematic, right? So because ultimately what you're saying is there really is no fence, there's no guardrail to how you're thinking about pricing, and that dilutes a ton of margin. So if you think about, like how you talked about the bands, let's just say it's volume based or something like that, but those top customers who are strategic and they're partnering with you, they're helping to develop the next edition, and they're deeply entrenched with your business, there's really strong rationale for why they should get the best per unit pricing versus someone who comes in off the street, buys once, and they're getting as good a deal just because they were a really good negotiator. That's really problematic because there isn't any incentive to buy more. There's your cost to serve is way out of line for some of those smaller transactionals often, and those kind of things become important in the economics of your business. And if I had a business, anytime I walk into one of these businesses and someone's saying there's a lot of custom pricing, the first place I'm going to look is, let me look at the transaction detail. And I bet there's an opportunity for you to have a little bit more structure. And like you said, you're going to be able to squeeze out quite a bit of margin. Not to mention, I bet there's some opportunities in the tactical execution of these negotiations that are going on. But just structurally, you're going to be able to get a lot more margin out of it that way.
Well, and I think they're also able to actually forecast margin movement. If they make wholesale changes to their price list, then at least they know with reasonable certainty what that's going to do, A, to demand, but also what that's going to do to their net retained margin as well. And so being able to do modeling and forecasting becomes infinitely easier, as opposed to if every single customer gets their own unique price on every single SKU. How do you model that? It's almost impossible to model that, right? And so it becomes a fait accompli that, okay, we don't really do price modeling and we really don't do forecasting very accurately, or we don't even attempt to do it because it's an impossible thing to do. But to your point, I think the bigger issue, and I see this all the time, even as a retail consumer in the retail world, let's say I'm a long-term customer of a cell phone plan provider, for example. And then I see a deal come on TV for brand new customers and they get 50% off for their first 3 months, or they get their first month free, whatever it is. And I'm going, man, I've been with these guys for 5 years and I don't get anything for free. I get no incentive. I don't get any incentive to stay with them. But if I canceled my contract and then literally re-signed up the next month, I would get a better deal than what I get as a loyal customer. And so I think what you're saying is we have to think about the pricing strategy not just for our new customers and courting new business and winning new accounts, but we have to think about our loyal customers probably more so than acquiring new customers.
Yeah, if you think about it, say you're a $50 million business, even if say you're growing 10% a year, that's $5 million. You have the other 50 that you have to manage, right? So losing some of those key customers can be catastrophic compared to if you're planning to grow 3 million on a base of 50, but you lose a $7 million existing customer. Like, that's gonna be really hard to overcome with new sales. I like to think, so the way you framed it up is accurate. I like to think about the new customer strategy and the existing customer strategy separately. While you're going to do a lot of research to understand where there's pricing potential and opportunities and process, how you deploy that is going to be different because you have different things to consider. And the customers are not all the same just because they're a customer. Some may be priced at legacy pricing. Let's say they've been grandfathered for a long time. And sometimes that's a problem for your profitability. And you're delivering a ton more value, but you're not claiming that through pricing. Like, those things need to be addressed. And they need to be addressed differently than someone just walks in the door today. They have a history, they have context. Maybe they have lower satisfaction on some things than somebody who's coming in the door ready to be a new customer. So you got to consider those things.
And and this may be an area that you don't touch, and it would make sense that you might not, is cost to serve. And this is something that I think that many brands don't even look at when they think about segmentation of their customers. And they will oftentimes look at propensity to discount. They'll look at lifetime value through some kind of lens. They'll be looking at customer acquisition cost of that customer, potentially even by channel. They will be looking at channel cost, acquisition cost by channel. They will be looking at average revenue per customer per channel. So there's certain things that brands will be looking at. But one of the things I see routinely overlooked is cost to serve. And when all things seemingly are created equal, I got 2 customers that seemingly spend about the same amount with me every single year. One has a propensity to return that's 2 times the other, and that same person also tends to contact us, whether that be through email, phone, live chat, carrier pigeon, whatever it is. They tend to contact us 2 times as much per purchase as the other person. Those 2 customers are not created equal. And so therefore, when you're thinking about pricing or promotions to those 2 different customers, whilst if you just purely look at the annual revenue you drive from those customers, when their cost to serve is radically different and their propensity to return and discount is radically different, the net margin that you make off those 2 customers is radically different. And so how often do you see brands starting to think about margin on a per customer average basis as part of their pricing and discounting model?
Yeah, I see it sometimes and sometimes not. And it's almost like a maturity thing. As because it relies heavily on the ability to track. For example, I worked with a client a few months ago, and they were just starting to track some of the disparities in consumption of their support services. This was a B2B organization. I think it was a SaaS company. And when they looked at that data, they were shocked. There were some of these customers, low contract value, but extremely heavy. Yes, they were high maintenance. And then they looked at some of the others who had low consumption of it and were doing great. And so they started to figure out, okay, maybe we need to solve this from a service perspective differently, or we need to have different channels for support of these different types, or maybe some of these that are really high demand, we need to create a custom package and say, hey, this comes at a higher price. So rather than cutting them off, you're giving them an option. Is look, either we're going to work differently, or you're going to have to find another one. But in this case, you're consuming so many resources, we've got to treat you differently. And which then forces a healthy discussion, because they're like, it's actually because you guys haven't solved this certain part of your portal or whatever it is, and it doesn't link up with our system very well, so it's causing problems on our side. So a lot of times addressing that directly can be advantageous.
Yeah, and look, I think that you make a very good point, which is that sometimes when we have customers that seem problematic, seem very costly to acquire, to service, to retain, etc., oftentimes we're making a rod for our own back because of our behaviors that drive their negative behaviors. And so what we need to do is we need to do some root cause analysis, fix the root cause of the problem so that we're not creating that problem. And then I think secondarily, and this goes back to, there's Hamish Mackay has created this new app with his business partner, order editing, and it's just an app for Shopify, and it allows people that make a mistake when they create their order or they enter their address or whatever, and they realize it after they've completed their order, like all those tickets would normally go to customer service and have to be manually fixed by customer service. But his app allows you within a certain window of time after the order is placed to go back in and make those edits yourself. And then they go back in via API, their app via API adjusts the order, and then boom, updates all the downstream systems, WMS, etc. And it basically eliminates 50% of the service tickets as a result. And I think that a lot of brands would do well to look across the full spectrum of their operations and say, is there some low-hanging fruit that we can knock on the head that says, okay, our cost base to service our customers is too high. Why is it too high? Is there 1, 2, or 3 things that we're consistently doing with low efficiency, or maybe it's just flat out wrong, we're making mistakes, that if we correct those things, then all of a sudden our cost base drops dramatically, and then all of a sudden we have a whole bunch more pricing power to play with as and when we need to.
Absolutely. Yeah, there's some companies that I've been made aware of recently. Orderprotection.com does a lot of this. If you're e-commerce and you're having a lot of challenges on that post-purchase process, they're focused on saying, hey, is it better to just outsource it and have it done through another company, or is it better to do it in-house and have to get as good as the experts? And that's always a good question. Should we buy or build, or what's the best approach to this problem?
Or if we outsource it, does it mean we don't feel the pain anymore and we're just writing a check for it, and actually we need to feel the pain so that we can actually identify where the root cause issue is, as opposed to just outsourcing the pain? Let's insource the pain and let's actually eliminate the pain as opposed to just deal with it.
Yeah.
Makes sense. Makes sense. Look, this has been an absolutely fascinating conversation, and it's something that I am absolutely not an expert in. I delve into it a little bit, especially in the B2B world, because I find that pricing tends to be really messy in the B2B world, but clearly you've got much greater depth of experience dealing with messy pricing scenarios. What if you had to give 1 or 2 top tips to brands that want to start and embark for the very first time, taking a more strategic approach to their pricing model, as opposed to maybe the haphazard supply chain based? Because I find that most brands, they really just base it on availability of product, what it costs them, and then what they think is a reasonable margin for themselves. That's where they start. If someone wants to get slightly more mature than that, what are like 1 or 2 tips that you would say, this is where you start?
Yeah, it's a great question. The first place I would start is to say, how can you shift your thinking related to pricing away from costs and toward value? That's going to open up a lot of potential for you, because then you're going to start solving the problem differently, saying, what could I do that could add more value? So we'll go back to your example of those solution selling for that parts manufacturer. Just starting to think differently about it is going to be the first step. The second one is going to be, when you look at your range of offerings, what are some of those that are potentially undervalued, but you haven't put the time into to actually activate valuing it more appropriately? And what are some of the things that if you were to give just more attention to pricing overall and to carve out some time, get a few people in the room, somebody with numbers, somebody who's a good strategist, and somebody who knows the business, a few people, and just spend some time saying, where is there pricing potential in our business? And then mapping that out and going chasing it, you're going to get some pricing gains there. And it's mostly for lack of not doing it that most people are leaving money on the table in the form of price.
I saw one of the strangest pricing models I've ever seen. It was a B2B brand, and they rolled at their different pricing tiers. They rolled both discounts and freight into a base price model. And that was a really complex thing because at checkout through digital channels, we couldn't easily break out the discount per unit that they were getting based on volume buying. And we also couldn't break out their freight cost per order. It was all just rolled into the line item price of the goods.
So you're flying blind.
And so the customer, the actual buyer, was flying blind. They had no idea what part of the total cost was a cost of goods, whether that individual line item was at a discount that they were expecting to receive, nor what it was costing them to have it shipped to the destination of their branches that they were having it shipped to. Super messy. And basically they had a microservice sitting behind the scenes that when the cart was tallied in real time, when the cart was loaded, it would fetch that line item price from their microservice, this really complex calculation in the back end, and then just feed back the line item price to the front end in the cart, and then recalculate the cart and recalculate the unit price per item in the cart in real time to then get a total price. Absolute disaster. So do you have any examples like this that you have run into that are just so out of the norm that you go, when we see these, it's a 3-alarm flyer?
Yeah, I don't want to call anybody out really, but what I would say is really common besides like something structural like that just looks unusual. But I'd say that one of the things I see is people getting fixated on something they think they can price at. For instance, I worked with an insurance company. They were sure that this certain range was the range they could be in. And I did some research and identified actually double that range would be just fine. And by the way, they made the changes and it worked great for them. And they were able to increase their margins significantly. Anything that you're fixated on as the right way to do without testing and thinking about it strategically and doing some external research, anything like that's going to be bad. The example you gave there is that if you were to talk to customers in terms of what that experience is, you'd learn some important things pretty quickly, whether that's good or whether there's a reason most people break some things out.
Love it. Absolutely. No, couldn't agree with you more. Now, Pat, as we come down to the end of our time together, this is where I get to flip the script, hand the microphone over to you, let you ask me one question, any question you like, can be personal or professional. Pat Meegan from IGS, what is your question for me today?
Yeah, since there's a lot of e-commerce folks, we've been talking about that today. What do you see as, in terms of the e-commerce brands I'm talking to, are frequently focused on how am I going to get to the traffic I need and the current conversion I need? What are some of the biggest things that you see, even in a mature space? Like they've been working these businesses for years, and it's almost like it feels like it's scorched earth in a lot of ways. If someone's going to come in and say, there's one thing to take a fresh look at, what would you say that is?
I would say, particularly in the B2B space, because that's where I'm so focused heavily now in my career, is digital acquisition of new customers is something that B2Bs still do not. It's very rare that I see a B2B look at digital acquisition of customers as a priority. 99% of the time, they're relying on field sales, customer service, inside sales, account managers, BDMs, BDRs. They use all sorts of different sort of sales models as opposed to marketing models to acquire new customers. But what we know now, and the data shows, is that over 60% of B2B buyers are now millennials. It's something like 61% of B2B buyers in the United States today are millennials. So when they start their search for a new B2B supplier of goods, they're not picking up the phone and calling their friends, and they're not picking up the yellow pages. They are starting their supplier search just like they do in their personal life on Google or on Amazon. They are now starting their supplier search online for new suppliers. And if you are hiding your e-commerce and digital experience and catalog behind a gated login to where basically I can't see even what you carry until I've logged in and I've authenticated, then that means your catalog is not exposed to Google. It's not indexed by Google. And even if you supply widget X, if somebody searches for widget X online and looking for a supplier of widget X, you are not even going to be in the consideration set because you have hidden your light under a bushel, so to speak. And so that is one of the biggest challenges I see. And B2Bs are, oh, we don't want our competitors to see how much inventory we have. We don't want our competitors to see what our pricing model is. We don't want our competitors to see what SKUs we carry so that they can compete with us. There's this, it's very much the same mindset that I saw in B2C and D2C 10, 15 years ago. That is the mindset that still persists in B2B today. And I think B2B brands are increasingly starting to realize, even if I don't show price necessarily, even if I don't necessarily show inventory count, even if I require authentication to get that personalized experience for my buyers, at least if I show an open catalog from a product information perspective, so that at least my PDPs can be indexed, my product data and attributes can be indexed. People can come to my website and they can download PDFs and exploded drawings and spec sheets and all these other things and see images of my products. At least if they can do that, then I'm going to be in the consideration set as a supplier for that product. And then they can make if they're genuinely interested in buying off me, at least they can make an inquiry through the front end and through an inquiry form to say, hey, what does it take to become a trade buyer of yours? And so this is something that I'm seeing. The mindset is definitely starting to slowly change because the buying cohort and their expectations is changing really fast.
Great.
Make sense?
Yeah, it does.
Love it. Listen, Pat, I will put your LinkedIn profile link in the show notes as well as the IGS link in the show notes. Other than that, how do you like people to get a hold of you if they want to learn more about strategic pricing approaches and talking to you basically about, hey, we got problems with pricing. We don't really know how to solve, but we think you can. How do they reach out and get a hold of you?
Yeah, that LinkedIn's a great way. Also, igsinsights.com is our website. So feel free to reach out. Love to chat with folks.
Awesome. Pat, thank you so much for your time. Can't wait to speak to you again soon.
If you'd like to get mentored by Jason for free, head over to greenwoodconsulting.net, scroll to the bottom of the page, and click Get Mentored by Jason.